980 The Wing.
Welcome back to Wilmington's Morning News. It's a pleasure to have you alongside this morning. 910-763-4000 is our studio hotline where you can call or text and get your comments in on the air this morning. Well, a historic day for all the wrong reasons in Washington, D.C. yesterday, as for the first time ever, a House Speaker has been ousted in a vote by his fellow members of his position. 216 to 210 was the final vote. Never ceases to amaze me how Republicans are able to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, and it's unfortunately a sad tale that repeats itself. Joining us exclusively on the program this morning, a man who was in that chamber yesterday afternoon, Congressman David Rouzer is our guest this morning. Congressman Rouzer, good morning to you. A busy week in Washington, D.C. Pretty rough situation for Republicans yesterday.
Well, you're correct. It's a sad day in America. It's a sad day here at the Capitol. The Democrats are rejoicing. And a lot of people don't realize, we can't get back to work until we figure out who the next speaker is going to be. I've had some text me saying, I'm so glad Patrick McHenry is going to be speaker. Well, he's just the interim speaker until we get an actual speaker. And so we can't take any bills to the floor, speak on the floor, or have any legislative activity on the floor until we figure out the speakership. This is a very unfortunate event, and a lot of it is based in significant misunderstanding, which when you have different parties that have different understanding levels of the nuances and the process here, sometimes that leads to distrust, and I think that was part of the reason for the outcome yesterday. But whoever the new speaker is, and let's assume things go as smoothly as possible, we'll be hearing from the candidate. We'll be hearing from the candidates next Tuesday night that plan to run for speaker. We'll presumably have a vote in the conference next Wednesday morning, and provided that the conference settles around somebody with a majority vote, when you get to the floor, you still have to get to 218. And so that is a super majority of the majority vote that you have to achieve on the floor. And, these 8 to 14, 15 or so, depending upon the day, they can extract all kinds of demands that make it terribly difficult to govern in a very, very narrow majority in the House. Keep in mind, we only have a 4-seat majority, basically. 4 seats flip, and we're in the minority. Likewise, 4 votes flip, and we're in the minority. And whenever we don't stick together, basically we give the majority to the Democrats. The other thing a lot of people don't realize is we're not sure yet what this is going to do. And I had dinner last night with Jamie Comer, who's chairman of Oversight. Many of your listeners are going to know the name. He's been in the news a lot lately. He's been doing incredible work in uncovering the malfeasance and corruption of the Biden family, and all kinds of new bank records and all that. Well, that basically is put on hold until we figure out a new speaker. Not to mention the fact that as of November the 14th, I believe, this current continuing resolution expires. And if we don't have a speaker at that point in time, it means that we cannot continue to fund the government after November the 14th. So I think that's one of the reasons, too, why you're seeing the financial markets getting a little jittery, and probably will more so here over the next few days. And certainly if we don't have a speaker voted on by the end of next week in the chamber that can get 218 votes, you'll probably even see many more jitters. So there's a lot on the line here, and this is not easy stuff. When you have to get 218 votes for the speakership, I'm not sure if anybody in the Republican conference is capable of that. And if you hit that point, then you're looking at basically a coalition government with Democrats, because the government has got to operate. The House has got to operate. I mean, it's a national security risk if the House of Representatives is not operating. And so it could get really squirrely. But if we can't get 218 votes for a Republican on the floor, then basically you're looking at a coalition government with Democrats, and you know what demands they're going to have. which is not going to be good. So basically, this act yesterday took us from having the majority in the House to now basically we are in the minority until we can figure out how to get back to the majority. That's the bottom line. The Democrats have the majority in the Senate. The Democrats have the White House. And for those who are upset about things, let me just say there are a lot of people on TV who take a grain of truth and cloak it in a lot of falsehoods. I've never seen a time of more misinformation. Some of it is just because some members just don't understand what they're talking about. And in some cases, it's a little malicious. And so, that's part of the distrust that's developed within the House Republican Conference here of late, in particular. So yeah, no, this is not anything to celebrate. I know there are a lot of people out there that don't like McCarthy. I talked to you. I know how you feel. I have a very good idea why you think what you think. But let me just underscore the fact that we have one chamber, or had one chamber, the House. Any appropriations bill, any spending bill, not only has to get through the House, it has to get through the Senate. And then not only that, it has to be signed into law by the president. So at the negotiating table, Kevin's outmanned 2-1 from the get-go. Because you got the White House there, you have the Senate there, and you have him there negotiating. Now, whoever the new speaker is, given the events that have transpired, is going to have a much weaker hand than Kevin did. Not to mention the fact they basically just took out our number one fundraiser and political architect who had never lost a cycle. We were never in the minority when he was. In fact, we just continued to win under Kevin, gaining seats. Every cycle we gained seats. Even in the last cycle, we gained seats. That's how we got the majority, although it wasn't as many seats as we would have liked to have had. So I hope that helps to lay things out a little bit. Next thing I want to point to is last week. Last week we had 4 appropriations bills on the floor. We passed 3 of them. The 4th one failed, the one dealing with what we call agapropes, which funds the U.S. Department of Agriculture and FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. That one failed because the cuts were just so deep in so many areas that farm state members voted against it in bloc. Farm state members from Iowa, Illinois, et cetera. And so that put the House at 4 total appropriations bills passed. You know how many the Senate has passed? 0. And for those that are concerned about the debt, and we all are, we're making cuts in all these appropriations bills as best we can. But the driver of the debt is the 75% of the budget that's not touched. And that's the debt service payment, which you can't touch that. You gotta make your debt payment, which, by the way, is continuing to grow. And then Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the other mandatory spending programs, including some veterans benefits. All that is in the 75% that is growing astronomically because healthcare costs are growing astronomically. I mean, the largest, biggest budget item for the federal government is healthcare in the form of Medicaid, which the states partner with, and of course, Medicare, which is a huge chunk of the federal budget. So we have 2 things working against us: increased healthcare cost, and then demographics. A lot of people are hitting retirement age and are eligible for Medicare, and we don't have enough younger people coming behind us. So those are the dynamics really that are driving the debt in a substantial way. But yet nobody wants to talk about entitlement programs and what we need to do to make modifications to them. President Trump says, nope, don't talk about it, don't touch it. Biden says, don't talk about it, don't touch it. But that's what's driving the debt. And until we man up and have a real conversation with the American people, and one of the things, by the way, that was in the the continuing resolution last week that was tanked by these same Republicans that just tanked McCarthy, had a 27% cut across the board in approps for all the discretionary spending, that 25% of the budget that we're talking about here with regard to approach bills. 27% cut, with the exception of no cuts for defense, no cuts for veterans benefits that are in the discretionary column, and no cuts for Homeland Security and border security. So overall, that would have been if you add all that up, that's about an 8% cut in total. Included with that was a provision that put in place all the great policies, mandated all the great policies that Trump had in place for the border. And in addition to that, established a debt limit, established a debt commission, an entitlement spending commission, basically, to go in and put together a panel of experts to help us figure out what modifications we can make to these entitlement programs to not only help to curtail the debt moving into the future, but also to preserve these programs long term. People don't realize in about 8 years, if we don't do something with Social Security, everybody's going to take about a 21% cut in benefits. And that's under the statute, because at that point in time, there'll be less money coming in than there is going out. And the trust fund is depleted. The little backstory to that is we borrowed all that trust fund money, which started years and years and years ago. So basically everything being paid into Social Security Medicare now is going right back out the door. It's not like there's any trust fund there. It's only a trust fund in terms of the way it's viewed on paper. So that all that was in that continuing resolution that they tanked. And presumably they tanked it because they just wanted to go ahead and let the government shut down until we got all the appropriations bills done at the end of the year. Well, let me tell you, when the government shut down for 2 or 3 days, it doesn't kill the military. They can handle it, even up to a week. But you go further than that, and it's a real problem. Everything in the military, all the procurement, all the weapons, everything, all these plants. Ken Calvert, who's the chairman of Defense Approach, got up and explained to the conference late last week. He's like, look, you got to realize there's no more planes built. There's no more missiles built. There's no more ammunition. All this stuff shuts down. And it costs a whole lot more to shut down and restart an operation than to keep it running, which is why over the course of history, shutdowns cost a whole lot more than what people think, billions more. And so there's a lot of misunderstanding about a lot of this. We're having a big fight over appropriations when, in fact, if you got rid of every single discretionary dollar except for defense appropriations, you don't even make a dent in the debt. It doesn't even touch it. It doesn't even touch it. Now, does that mean that there's not room to cut? Absolutely, there's room to cut. When I was in the legislature, Carolyn Justice and I and several other members, we cut line by line when we had a budget deficit. When I was in the state Senate, Carolyn was in the state House, and the state was facing a $3 billion budget shortfall. There's a lot of us in Congress that know how to cut, and a lot of those cuts are being made. The problem is the debt's at $33 trillion. You can't do all this overnight. You have to do it in stages. And not only that, to do what you really want to do, you got to have a majority in the Senate, and you got to have the White House. And even then, it's not easy, because in the Senate, you got to get 60 votes. Which means whatever comes out of Republican House, even if you have the majority in the Senate, you still got to go negotiate with Chuck Schumer if you don't have 60 votes. So it's not that Republicans and conservatives in Congress have been failing everybody. I think a lot of it is a very complete, total misunderstanding of how Congress works and just the arduous process that's in place here. And that's all by design.
No question about it.
That's all by design by our founders. So this is not a good day. That doesn't mean we won't come out of it, and perhaps I hope and pray we come out of it stronger than we are right now, but it's not a good day.
No question about that. Congressman David Rouzer is our guest this morning. Congressman, if you can hang on for me, I got to grab a quick break. I want to talk about the path forward on this and what Republicans do in the next 40-some-odd days. You're listening to Nick Craig and Wilmington's Morning News. We're joined exclusively this morning by Congressman David Rouzer. He represents the 7th District here in southeastern North Carolina, talking about all of the ongoings in the House of Representatives yesterday. Congressman Rouzer, we got just a few minutes left. I really appreciate your time this morning. I've got a two-part for you. I find myself quite frustrated in the couple of Republicans that led this charge against McCarthy. I haven't heard a plan going forward, and I think one of the things that's missed in all of this is these 8 Republicans worked with Democrats to oust McCarthy, the same thing that they're critical of the former speaker for doing. So would you just react to both of those for me?
Yeah, well, a couple other points, and you lead into what I was going to say very, very well. So there's a very, very famous basketball coach that called one of my colleagues yesterday, and he said, "Hey," he said, "what in the world is going on up there?" And so my colleague explained it to him, and he said, "Well, you know what we do with players like that?" He said, "We put them in the portal system and ship them somewhere else." And we don't have that option in Congress. Each member of Congress is subject to the vote of their constituency, their district back home. And what's very difficult in terms of governing today is there's just so much misinformation out there, and a lot of things are believed by those who watch and listen to some of these shows that just simply aren't based in truth. One of the things that isn't based in truth is this thing that McCarthy kept the appropriations bills from coming to the floor. That's not true at all. These eight, or and various factions of this 8 to 21, they blocked the rule back in the summer for these bills to come to the floor. They blocked the rule. And they say they blocked the rule because they weren't confident about what the spending level was going to be on future appropriations bills. Okay, well, fine. Well, when you come down to the floor and you say McCarthy didn't bring the appropriations bills forward in a timely manner, the reason why he didn't and couldn't is because you blocked the rule. They leave that part out very conveniently. So it's very frustrating, and not everything is what it seems to be. Let me just leave it at that.
Absolutely. Congressman David Rouzer is our guest here this morning. We've got about a minute and a half left. Congressman Rouzer, briefly talk about constituent services and how folks can get in touch with your office if they're having issues with passports, Social Security, other things like that.
Well, we do about 70, help with about 70 passports a week, and the Wilmington office there stays quite busy with that. But you can always go to rouzer.house.gov and make a request for help with expediting passport or any other issue that one might have with a federal agency that they're struggling with. The office number there in Wilmington, too, is 910. Let's see, what is it? 910-395-0202. Yeah, 910-395-0202.
You're not just saying that. People, got a call off the air from a listener last week who said her and her husband were trying to travel internationally. There was a huge backlog with the passport. They were able to call your office and get it squared away in about 2 or 3 days. So it's not just this idea that you guys are helping. It's actually making a huge impact on people's lives. So that's great to hear.
Well, we get that feedback all the time, and the DC number, of course, is 202-225-2731, 225-2731. But if you go to that website, rouzer.house.gov, you can you'll see a lot of different options that may be helpful in terms of your pursuits, including tours, et cetera, flags flown over the Capitol. And in addition to that, obviously, there's a way to email the office through that, as well as sign up for the newsletter. And a lot of people get the newsletter, and I try to be very straightforward and share what perhaps is not completely shared in the news media.
Congressman David Rouzer, our guest this morning. Appreciate your time this morning, Congressman. Good luck with everything up in D.C. We'll catch up soon.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
Getting the real 411 breakdown there from Congressman David Rouzer this morning, a conversation you're only hearing exclusively right here on Wilmington's Morning News. So now we wait and see.